everyone, my name is Gabby and I am back with my review for the next 2 episodes of the 7th season of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. If you didn't see my first video where I reviewed episodes 1 and 2 of season 7, I will leave that in the card up here, or you can click the link down below in the description to check it out. I'm absolutely loving the 7th season of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. so far, and I'm so pumped to dive in and discuss the next 2 episodes with you, which take place in the 1950s. I'm going to jump right on in. If you for some reason are not caught up on the 7th season of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you should go and do that so you can come back and discuss with all of us who have watched the episodes. But without further ado, I want to dive right on in. So be warned, spoilers are happening. Episode 3 of season 7 is titled Alien Commies from the Future, and I think that's such a great episode title. This episode was a lot of fun, and I feel like it's the first moment you really get to see the characters kind of enjoying the time travel aspect a little bit, because the first 2 episodes felt very high stakes, and I feel like you got a lot of jokes and comedic moments in this episode that I really loved. But additionally, there's some serious conversations that are had in this episode about racism and sexism that I really loved and I thought were so powerful and brilliant. One of the moments in the episode that really starts this whole conversation is when Daisy and Coulson and Mac and Yo-Yo are in a diner. There's somebody that they're looking to take hostage to try to get information as to what the Chronicom's plan is for them being in the 1950s. Immediately, Daisy notices the segregated bathrooms. She remarks on the fact that not a lot has changed. Even if the 1950s were like this golden era, there's still a lot of progress to be made, and I think that's a really brilliant way of beginning to spearhead this conversation that's had throughout the rest of this episode and into episode 4. And I think for me, one of the things that I personally enjoyed even more is that Deke ends up being at the center of this conversation, because he's a character that is so innocent to everything that is going on, because he has no idea what life in the past is like. He grew up in a dystopian world, and so the concepts of like racism and sexism are probably somewhat foreign to him, because the Kree probably just treated everyone that was human horribly, and all the other humans basically had to band together or just saw it as an every man for themselves type situation, and so nobody was really a fan of each other. But the idea of racism and sexism probably wasn't that obvious to him the way that it was to the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. So there's this moment later on in the episode where Yo-Yo and Mac have tried to interrogate this guy who's super racist and sexist and get no progress with him. Mei goes in with him and he calls her a few names. Essentially, they all realize they're not going to be able to make any progress with this guy, and so they all just turn and look at Deke, and he first makes a few jokes about having a way with words, and it's really funny and cute. And then when they all look at him, he points to his face as if he's like, because like he doesn't want to say it. And it's so adorable, and my heart just melted. And so then when he finally, reluctantly agrees to talk to this guy, he leaves with one of the best one-liners in this show's history. He says 3 words: stupid, white, privilege. And it's so funny, but it's so brilliant coming from his character, because he's acknowledging the fact that his skin color carries some weight in this situation, and he has an ability to have some leverage over this guy that the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents don't have, despite the fact that he's the lowest ranking member of the team. It's a moment where we're really acknowledging that really weird paradigm, and how this really diverse cast of characters is having to go through a lot of struggles because of the environment that they're in. It's not welcoming to them in the way that it would be to Deke. Because when Deke goes in to talk to that guy and interrogate him, the guy immediately assumes that Deke is the one in charge, and Deke is surprised that he jumps to that right away. And it's so funny because nobody would ever think that Deke would be the one in charge in any situation, but just because of the color of his skin, this guy immediately jumps to that. And it's so interesting how that conversation is had. It's done in a little bit of a comedic way, because you're having that conversation with a character that's traditionally used as the comedic relief, but it's a very serious conversation, and I just love how the writers navigated that. It's so brilliant. It was by far one of my favorite moments in this episode. So to talk about the other Deke Shaw moment in this episode before we move on to some other plot points, we get to see Deke in suspenders, which I was like all for. Like I said, I'm gonna keep coming back to the costuming in these reviews because the costumes for this season are freaking amazing. Daisy's yellow getup in this episode amazing. I just love the costuming so much. So good. But anyway, we have this conversation that happens between Deke and Daisy. Daisy ultimately is a little bit still upset at Deke for not taking the shot. Deke is like, I don't want to take that onto my hands. I don't want to be responsible for that. Daisy is ultimately like, you've never shied away from these type of conversations before. What's going on? And Deke delivers such a good line. Look, I'm not the guy you met in the lighthouse, not anymore, and I don't want to be. And I heard that line and I just, it moved me because Deke is a character that's had so much growth and he's trying so hard to be a good person, to find his place in this team, and nobody ever gives him a chance. And I love his character and the fact that he can have funny moments like he had when he was pointing at his face and making the joke about white privilege, and then there's a moment where he's like zipping the tent and he does it like really slowly, and I find that funny. So he can have those moments, and then he can have moments like this that are really serious and major character development moments, and moments where you're seeing a lot of character growth. Jeff Ward, oh my god, the talent. The fact that he can do both of those things in one episode is so amazing to me. And I just love Deke as a character, and I don't understand how other people don't like him, because I've been seeing a lot of Deke hate on my Twitter feed, and it's been making me very upset because he's such a great, nuanced, interesting character, and I love him so much, and he has some of the best moments in this season, and it makes me so happy. And that line in particular really got me, and I'm just so excited for whatever happens for his character. I'm just praying that he lives through the 7th season. The rest of this episode is Coulson and Gemma infiltrating this SHIELD base to try to find out where the Chronicoms are, what their plans are, to try to shut down this device that they're planning to set off that will cause a large explosion and take out lots of SHIELD agents. And we get to see Gemma take on the alias as Peggy Carter, and I was so excited about it. Her costume was amazing, her performance was amazing, she was so great. And I don't know if the writers intended to have Haley Atwell come back for the 7th season and she decided she wasn't gonna do it, and so they decided to have Gemma be Peggy Carter instead, but I was very happy with that plotline and how it was written and where we went with that, because it was so great. And particularly it was such a perfect introduction for Sousa, who we got back for this 7th season. Enver. Oh, Enver. He's amazing. I absolutely fell in love with his portrayal of Sousa when I watched Agent Carter, and to get to see him back, and the fact that he was able to come back and just pop right back into this character after 2.5 years is amazing to me. Enver has so much range. He's so talented. I was so happy to see him as Sousa again. This episode just made me so happy. I was just loving every moment of it. And I think a large part of it is because there's lots of really good comedic moments, and you're really playing up on a lot of the characters' nerdiness at getting to take in all of the SHIELD history, particularly Simmons and Coulson. There's a good moment where Simmons and Coulson are interrogating all of these different scientists that are working at the base and trying to find out if they're Chronicoms or not. And Clark Gregg, oh, the whole scene is great, but the one particular moment that really got me is when he says the word moist. And he does it several times, and he like elongates every single syllable. It's brilliant. I was dying laughing. It was so well delivered. And also his reaction to seeing Sousa for the first time was so nerdy and adorable, and I loved it. I loved getting to see Sousa's entrance into this episode, particularly his first interaction with Gemma, because he immediately knows that she's not Peggy Carter, and there's sort of this confusion because like Simmons is trying to find someone that's infiltrated the base when Sousa knows that she's infiltrated the base, and there's lots of like confusing things going on, but it was just so fun to watch that whole sequence of scenes. They were so well done. And then we get to Yo-Yo and Mei, and they're sort of where I want to end my thoughts on this episode on. Didn't talk about Mei in the first 2 episodes, mainly because I just didn't know what was going on with her character, and I kind of wanted to see where things went before I started discussing. And we get to see the first major emotional reaction out of Mei in this episode, and she and Yo-Yo are infiltrating the base as fighter pilots, woman fighter pilots, and they're dressed in outfits similar to mine. This is obviously obviously from Captain Marvel, so I figured I would wear it for this review and do some fun outfits to match the time period of each of the episodes as best as I can. I loved, for one, getting to hear about how Ming brought that up as a potential option for Natalia and her to wear for costuming, a way for them to fit into the time period, and the knowledge that Ming had of that history. And I thought that was really cool hearing Natalia and Ming talk about that and how that came to be in the episode. I thought that was so interesting, and I loved the costuming. They both looked amazing. But this whole sequence I think is really interesting because you're seeing both of these women struggle with things that they are naturally very good at. Yo-Yo still can't use her powers. We don't really know if she's lost them entirely because of the Shrike being in her system, or if she's still like hesitant to use them. Really, this episode sort of seemed to pin down the fact that she no longer has her powers, which is very sad because we don't know how she's gonna get them back. Some people are thinking we may see another Terrigenesis, which I think would be interesting to see how that works. But as for right now, I'm kind of just waiting to see what happens there. But Mei has a panic attack, and that immediately struck me because I was like, okay, what's happening here? Because Mei is normally always in control of her emotions, and this time she was not. She just lost it, and I was like, okay, she's having to go on a mission for the first time. There's a lot of things that she's taking in. This can be very overwhelming, and with the gas and everything, it can just be a lot. And so I thought this was sort of going to be an explanation of her having to learn to recontrol her emotions after all the trauma that she went through. Obviously, that's not what ends up happening, and we'll talk more about that once we get to episode 4, but wow, Ming-Na Wen is just a legend and just kills it, and I thought that scene was so brilliant, and her just reactions, it was so volatile and it's so different from what you normally see from Mei as a character, and I just thought that was brilliant. And then the whole fight sequence, they had an American Ninja Warrior on that set as the Chronicom doing all that like intense fight sequence. It was just amazing. It blew my mind. I thought that was so brilliantly choreographed. It was so beautifully shot, and it was just such an epic conclusion to that episode, and it was such a great fight sequence. There are so many great fight sequences on the show, and they're so well choreographed, and it's just always a joy every single time to watch. Now moving on to episode 4 of season 7, which is titled Out of the Past. So this episode is in black and white, so I think I should fix something. There we go. Much better. So we start off this episode sort of picking up with where Deke left off as a character, having these sort of realizations of the racism and sexism that's present in the 1930s and the 1950s. And he sort of makes a little bit of a joke about it at first, being like, well, everyone looks really good, but the racism and the sexism is yikes. And he has that conversation with Yo-Yo, and it's such brilliantly written dialogue that you get to see Deke have a serious conversation that he's really coming to recognize how serious these issues are and how his team is being affected by them and how he's feeling really bad about what it is that's happening. Deke has such a big heart, and I love him so much. The fact that he cares so much about this, that he's taking it seriously, that he wants to listen to his other teammates as to what it is they're experiencing, and that he's concerned, just, it warms my heart. I love him, and the writing there was so brilliant. The writers did such a good job tackling these subjects and fitting them into the episode with all the 9 million other plot lines that they have to address. So just, you have an amazing writer's room on S.H.I.E.L.D., and every single writer that is in charge of these episodes just kills it. They just crush it. It's just so great to watch these episodes unfold with people who take such care and concern into all of the tiny little details. Here we are back to the costuming. We get to see Deke in a fedora and a suit. I'm mainly paying attention to Deke's costuming because, like I said, it's my favorite out of all of the other characters, but in general, costuming in this season, amazing. But Deke in a fedora and a suit, I was like, hell yes. The fedora is particularly what struck me because Deke walks into this house. They're trying to pick up some item that Sousa is supposed to get and turn in, and ultimately, like, in the process of doing that, ends up getting killed. So they're trying to find that and maybe save Sousa's life, maybe not. We're kind of like unsure as to how they're gonna handle the situation, but ultimately they want to get their hands on that object before the Chronicoms do. And so Deke and Yo-Yo are in the house. They're looking for it. Yo-Yo goes upstairs. Deke is downstairs. He gets hit over the head and falls. And when Yo-Yo comes back downstairs, all she sees is the fedora. And so the fedora made me really upset because I was like, Deke in a fedora, and then the fedora is the only thing that's left after he gets kidnapped and I was just like, are you kidding me? I was just so upset. I was like, I was in love with this fedora 2 seconds ago, and now it's making me very sad. That was an emotional roller coaster that I had to go through, and it made me very stressed watching this episode. This episode was by far the most stressed that I've been so far this season in terms of like the plot and everything that's been going on, because I was like, I know Deke's gonna make it out of it okay, but I'm still scared. So I love that as this plot line continues, Yo-Yo is much more concerned about saving Deke than she is about getting the object to the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Coulson talks about that during his monologue that's narrating over the episode. He's like, I need to get my hands on the object. Yo-Yo doesn't want to give it to me because she wants to look for Deke, and I love her concern for him, like as she should be. Her concern should be about Deke, not about the object in the suitcase, and I just love that Yo-Yo has her priorities straight, because none of the other agents freak out when Deke gets kidnapped. They just don't care, and that made me very upset. No concern, no panic, no worry, nothing. But I guess it's fine. I guess it's whatever. I mean, he makes it out of there okay, but you know, glad to see that Yo-Yo and I get it, that we get it. I think Yo-Yo as a character is very underappreciated, and she very much gets sidelined in favor of like other storylines. And there's so much going on in the show, and it's so hard to make every character feel front and center, but her character definitely deserves more, because she's a good character who has a good heart, and I feel like there's a lot of times where I agree with her a lot, and I feel like I haven't appreciated her character as much as I should. So this is a moment to appreciate Yo-Yo. Yes, Elena, you're a queen. Love you. We find out that Deke was not kidnapped by the Chronocoms, but was kidnapped by Hydra, and Deke reunites with Freddy. And I was like, this is the reason why I wanted Deke to stay as far away from Freddy as possible. I didn't care that he was bonding with him. The minute that I found out that Freddy was a Malik, I was like, get Deke away from him, and this is why. Deke saving Freddy ultimately ended up saving his life. Freddy decides to let him go. But I think that moment strikes Deke significantly, because he realizes how callous Freddy has become, that he just takes lives without a bat of an eye, just doesn't care at all, has no regard for the well-being of other people around him, and is just incredibly selfish and concerned about his own rise to power and his own success. And that strikes Deke significantly, because he ultimately feels bad that he didn't take Freddy out sooner. Absolutely changes his mind on everything, and you see that he has that conversation with Yo-Yo to end the episode as a nice way to sort of tie the beginning and the end of this episode together, where it's ultimately like, I don't want to maintain the status quo anymore. I'm all in, like, let's do it. Let's make some waves. We cannot let these type of things continue to happen. And I love that for him. I love that character development for him. It was such a great episode for him, full of lots of serious moments, and it was just such a nice change of pace for his character. We get a little bit more development on Mei in this episode. We see her touch Simmons at one point and experience this like wonder at the object in front of her. She experiences sort of like confusion and disorientation when she touches Sousa. Simmons and Yo-Yo start to put this together, and they realize that Mei is an empath, and that when she touches people, she can feel their emotions, but she can't feel any of her own emotions. What? I'm like, Mei has a freaking superpower now? What? I love that the show does that it will just give characters powers and abilities at the most random moments. I absolutely didn't see that coming from 6 miles away. I wouldn't have seen it coming from a mile away. It was just such an insane reveal, and I was like, oh my god, this is brilliant, because she's gonna be able to find out who's a Chronocom or not, because she'll be able to tell whether they have emotions, because Chronocoms don't have emotion. Like, that's brilliant. Like, that's literally so perfect. That's so helpful. And I just loved that for her. I thought that's so interesting. And because Mei is a character that's constantly in control of her emotions, I think it's such a perfect character to play with that idea, because you'll get to see her react in a lot of ways she wouldn't normally react based on the people that she is touching or coming into contact with. And that's so fascinating. And I just thought that was such brilliant writing. So then we get to see the resolution to this whole question of, do we save Sousa, do we not? What the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents end up doing is letting Sousa die to preserve the timeline, but actually it's LMD Coulson. So Coulson shoots Sousa with an icer. Sousa goes down, he takes Sousa's outfit, and the Hydra agents shoot him. He falls into the pool, and then Simmons and Daisy take him out of the pool, and he briefs Sousa and is basically like, the timeline thinks you're dead. We preserved order. We didn't cause too many ripples or waves. We did what we needed to do to preserve the timeline, but now you're coming with us, and essentially fills him in on everything that's happened. And now we have another character that's a man out of time to end this episode. Ugh, I wasn't sure how this was gonna wrap up. I wasn't sure if they were only gonna have Enver on for an episode, and it seems like now he could be around for the rest of the season, and I'm really excited about that because he's such a great addition. I think he adds a very unique dynamic to this really great cast of characters, so I'm really excited to see where his character ends up. But I love the fact that they managed to save Sousa and still preserve the timeline in their own capacity, and I just had so much fun with this episode in the black and white. It definitely was the one that made me the most stressed, but I think that reveal at the end was so interesting. So last thing that I want to talk about for this review is Enoch. So Enoch is a character that is constantly underappreciated and undervalued, and I think you particularly see that in this episode because he's been left at this nightclub for like 20-something years, something like that, a decent period of time that he has had to live out. This entire episode, every scene that you see from him is him just answering the phone and connecting all the characters to the Zephyr and getting them to talk to each other as they're spread apart. Coulson calls him, and Coulson immediately is just like, connect me to the Zephyr, so Enoch connects him to the Zephyr. He does the same thing for Yo-Yo, he does the same thing for Deke, and he eventually just gets to the point where he's like, they don't want to talk to me, like they don't care. That made me worried. Like, it was the first moment where I started to feel suspicious of Enoch as a character. I was like, what if this makes him turn against the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents? Like, what if he feels so neglected that he's like, the humans don't care, and decides to side with the Chronicoms again? Like, I don't want to be suspicious of Enoch, but I'm just worried because I could see him thinking that. Like, I don't know. I feel like we're building up to something with this character, and I'm suspicious, and it made me worried. I was like, don't do that. Don't neglect him. That's bad. But he's such a great character, and Joel Stoffer does such a good job playing him. And I felt so bad this entire episode. He was just having to listen to some drunk guy talk about his whole miserable, sad life, and Enoch is like not having any of it. Like, it's so sad. It hurts my heart. Like, Enoch deserves better. On that note, I believe that is it for my reviews of episode 3 and 4 of season 7 of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any thoughts on these episodes, leave them down below in the comments. I would love to know what you're thinking. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. You can also hit the bell button if you want to be notified for when I post new videos. If you want to interact with me on social media, my Instagram and Twitter are in the description down below. It's at Gabby YA Books with 1 Y. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time in a new one. Goodbye!